been a great day that we've had here on Greenwood Lake, going around and try to show the people what Greenwood Lake was before and what it looks like now. I know that we've covered a lot of things and we've tried to answer a lot of questions, but I imagine you're going to have a lot more things we didn't cover. And I have to thank everybody who participated today, especially Doris Greck, who dreamed this whole thing up and planned it, Roger Riley, Ted Sly and his wife. It's just been terrific. Bill Schaefer, who loaned his boat and did a great job as captain. It's been a great thing. It's a beautiful day, and I hope you enjoy it very, very much.
And who's this charming young lady?
This is Doris Greck from this Maplewood Inn, who has set this whole thing up for us.
I've lived and loved Greenwood Lake most all my life, and I just felt that we had to do something to show people what it was really like in the past.
Besides Wilbur Crispin promoting this as historian, Doris Greck has been wanting to do this for so many years, and both of these people have planned this trip meticulously, and let's hope that it comes out historically as we'd like.
This is how the lake looked many, many years back, looking down the arm where we're going now. This, my finger there, is the Greenwood Park Boathouse. At one time, it was always all the way at the end of the arm. And they sold that piece of land, and Conklin Brothers slid this up on the ice in the wintertime to this location. And if you notice along here, these are little private boathouses. On the left-hand side as we go out, these were all private homes.
All right, this is Davies, known as the Edgewater, which is now known as the Rainbow. It's always been a boarding house, and now, like all the places on the lake, they changed from boarding houses to just restaurants and bars.
Can you give us some dates on some of these within reason? Has this been here, say, since the 20s or even earlier?
Oh, earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Earlier than the 20s.
Charlie Davy died in 1950. He was 90 years old. He had had it all his life. So
Yeah.
that goes way back.
The family here now has been here about 35 years. The Speck family own it now. From here on, this used to be known as the 500 of Greenwood Lake. There were people that had seats on the stock exchange, like Caulfield. There was Mr. Shore. He was a dealer in Persian rugs. And Mr. Hutchinson. And
Wire for Woolworths.
He was the buyer for Woolworths?
Did
I didn't know that.
Did the crash, are we talking about the crash of 29?
No,
These people lost it? Or,
no. We're talking
way back.
money,
Money
all
people.
the time. Money people
Yeah,
all the
they
were no
prevailed
crashes.
when
No
that
crashes here. So Moses, he owned office buildings and an insurance company on Wall Street, and they had their own stables, and they were very, very well to do. But as I say, this we always call from here on the 500. Now,
This is Shaw property. This was Mr. Shaw's. After he died, it was divided up into his 3 children. And the one daughter still lives there, and the rest of it, well, this has been sold off. They just don't use this piece at all. It's just gone to ruin, really.
See a for sale sign here on lake property. Now, I know that's very difficult, but what would a nice place go for in 1989?
That was about $400,000 in that vicinity.
Do you take checks?
I'm not active in the business anymore, but I know it's in that area.
About 400,000.
Incidentally, these walls that you see here, this was all filled in. Probably 20, 30 feet of this all the way along. It was all filled in.
and right here was the big boathouse that we showed you a picture
Right here.
of. right here was the big boathouse that we just showed you.
That was the one that was moved down the lake to this spot.
Was there a name to that again? I'm
So
sorry.
it was the Greenwood Park, it was the Greenwood Park boathouse, and they had a dance floor upstairs in it, and they had about 5 slips in there, and the big wigs got the slips. And everybody else tough. It was all Hutchinson's. Right from here on, this was his greenhouse. This building right here was his greenhouse.
Now it's 2 apartments.
Yep, and that next building there, he gave the 2 lots to his accountant. And that a fellow by the name of Roy Wood built that home there. And these 2 decrepit-looking docks are mine over here.
We won't take a picture of those.
No,
I thought that
this was Mr. Hutchinson's house here on the corner that we talked about.
That's just.
It was a very impressive house because they had the telephone in the kitchen for the maids to respond to the call and that. Oh, I thought it was the most elegant house I ever saw as a little
Mr.
girl.
Schaefer just said it just sold for $600,000. $690,000.
Right?
In that vicinity.
Oh.
That was less than that, a little less than
A little
that.
less than that, yeah. What?
Now, would you want to say that again?
That brown building that you see there was that's still part of the Windermere Hotel, which was one of the swanky hotels at Greenwood Lake. And that's how it looked back in the 1800s. It was run by William Wright.
It had a 9-hole golf course. It had a stable.
Driveway there, it's a circular driveway, and it's like a certain, I don't know, it was 1/8 of a mile or something like that. And he had racehorses and he trained them there. And Bill Wright himself told me that they took these horses on the ice in the wintertime and raced them with the corks in their shoes. That was the sulky races.
Right out here.
And when I was, I don't know, when I first started in business, I sold off some property for him here. He had a barn, and in the barn was one of the sulkies, still one of the sulkies. And up at the other end, at Jersey Avenue, when you go down Jersey Avenue, that was Bill Wright's airport. And Joe Murchio, who lived over this way, we're going near his now, he had a plane. He used to take people up for rides. And one time they decided that they were going to have a thing commuting from here to New York City. And Captain Smith took off and the first plane landed in an apple tree, and that was the end of that. Now, do you want
Was anyone badly hurt?
Nobody was hurt, and the plane stayed there for years. Okay. We're coming up on what was DeGraw's Willow Point, became Long Pond Inn. It was the spot where the boxes all came to. Joe Murchio had it. When he had it, he turned it upstairs of the building into a training camp, and we had all the famous fighters, Joe Louis and Ray Robinson, and on and on. I can't think of them all.
I've been working hard for this coming fight with Billy Conn for June 19th. I'm getting in good condition. I'm down to my fighting weight now, and I hope to knock him out.
I understand that Lewis hopes to knock me out this time. Well, I think that's just wishful thinking.
Four-time middleweight champion of the world, Sugar Ray Robinson, the man who made mockery of the old boxing axiom, they never come back, is currently in training at Greenwood Lakes, New York. The great boxing master is prepping to defend his middleweight crown in a September 23rd showdown with welterweight title holder Carmen Basilio. Sports writers who have called Robinson the greatest fighter pound for pound in the last 50 years know what they're writing about. Sugar Ray is a fistic genius. The next step in Ray's training is a session on his patented punching bag. Robinson favors it over the regular light bag because you can move against it as if it were a regular opponent, and it's just as hard to hit. To put together combinations on a target like this, your timing must be perfect. For winding up the day's training, the world middleweight champion Sugar Ray Robinson is gracious enough to grant us an informal and exclusive interview. Let's listen in as he talks with Chris Schenkel.
Ray, I must say, you couldn't find a more beautiful spot to train under.
Well, thank you, Chris. I rather enjoy it here. I've spent quite a number of years here in Greenwood Lake. I find it very comfortable for training.
But I suppose you've been here during the winter time when all these trees weren't quite as pretty as they are today.
Oh, yes. Gee, we've had some very bad winters here. The snow really piles up here, and it gets quite cold, too. We have the best ski slide, I imagine, in the state of New York, Mount Peter, right up here. And the activity here for winter sports during the winter is really something to see.
Ray, I knew you had taken up golf, but I didn't know that you'd become a skier.
Oh, no, I haven't. I just grew up to watch it.
Rocky Marciano, headquarters, Greenwood Lake, New York. Marciano lunges with a left jab, then hooks. And hooks again, and Matthews is knocked to the canvas. Rocky Marciano, the winner by a clean knockout in 2 minutes, 4 seconds of the second round.
Many of these great athletes who trained and vacationed in and around Greenwood Lake were very active in the community. World boxing champion Floyd Patterson spent many summers teaching local kids how to box at the Long Pond Training Facility. At one time, Rocky Graziano had ambitions to build a kids' community center in Greenwood Lake. Sadly, Rocky chose the wrong partner to do it with. That was Sally Burns Granello, well known as a Vito Genovese capo. The center was never built, and Granello, well, he mysteriously vanished. But that's a story for another day. Another national icon, Babe Ruth, affectionately known as the Babe, loved visiting the boxers that were training on the lake. The Babe loved spending time with the local youth and also supported the lake's community contributions towards the war effort by being part of the local fundraisers. Boxing legend Joe Louis, who trained on Greenwood Lake, also did his part to support the war effort by donating the proceeds from one of his championship fights. Joe is seen here in front of a fight poster at Long Pond Inn. This photo shows Joe Louis holding figurines of Hitler, Mussolini, and Emperor Hirohito while gesturing how he's going to knock out the villains of the world. It's no surprise that many of the iconic world champion boxers drew so much attention to the lake. Everyone had a dream of being the heavyweight champion of the world at that time. Everyone from Babe Ruth to the Little Rascals, and even Buckwheat.
Can you think of some, Doris?
Floyd Patterson, Tippy Larkin.
Right out of that building.
Well, not out of that building. That building burned many times.
This is the building here.
This is what was there. That was DeGroy's, it became Murchio's, it became Bingler's, and then Bingler named it the Long Pond Inn. And there's other building that you see here, that's DeGroy's Willow Point Hotel, and then that burned down in the 40s. And sitting there at the dock is the Queen of the Lake, the Montclair. And this little building was the ice house for DeGroy. Now, the DeGroys were early settlers here. As a matter of fact, I have a letter from their grandson, and his grandmother told him that her grandmother's family owned Tuxedo Park. Whitbeck, the name was, something to that effect. And that
Doris, what are we looking at the moment, just so I know? Excuse me, Mr.
Now, this is a very, very old picture. This is another picture at the same place a little bit later. This is the place that burnt down.
And this is where the boxers were?
Yeah, right. That became Long Pond Inn later on.
I'm sorry, Mr. Crispin, to interrupt your
That's
your
okay. Well, the DeGroy family way back owned Tuxedo Park.
Go out now.
And they sold it for, I don't know, $1 shilling an acre or 2 shillings an acre or something like that. Okay. This was all DeGroy's property originally. Back there, he sold that piece to Joe Jackson. But this was all his. And back up on the hill was where the Willow Point Hotel that burned down was. We had a lot of fires here in the 20s, especially after we got the fire trucks.
Hey, want to mention Mr. Jackson just briefly?
Oh, yes.
Just briefly. Well, whatever you'd like to do.
This home was right back up there. And Joe Jackson was a famous clown that performed all over the world before all the crowned heads of Europe. And he never spoke a word. He did this tramp bicycle act. His son carried it on, and up to a few years ago was still performing down in South America. Okay, Ted.
All right, well, I noticed, my wife noticed that someone's flying the German flag. I've noticed different nationalities here. Have there been kind of people from either German or Irish background or a particular
well, at one
group
time
here?
it was all German.
Oh,
because
why?
this was the Switzerland of America. This reminds you that... Well, that's what they called it. And Constance, of course, you know, this reminded them of
Lake Constance.
Lake Constance and the Rhine.
You're getting breezy now?
Yeah.
There you go.
Shall I go in? Is that the same house, Doris? Is this?
Yeah.
Yep. That was known as the Orange House. It was known as the Orange House way back, and that still was part of DeGrau's. And later on, DeGraw, I guess, gave it or sold it or something to his cousin, a fellow by the name of Schiffer.
Now, Wilbur, is this the same building or did this burn down too?
No, this is the same
It
building.
looks so similar.
This is the same building.
And can you kind of date this stuff a little bit?
Well, this picture is back in the 20s.
Right, just so we can...
This was taken March the 27th, 1920.
Because I'm getting a little confused between the 1890s and the 1920s and 30s.
This goes back further, but this picture was taken in the 20s.
And this is Breezy Point.
Yes. One of the big boats parked in
The
front of
Montclair
the
there.
Montclair.
Beautiful, beautiful foliage today. The lake is about twice its original size from when it was called Long Pond. When was it dammed?
It was dammed first in 1766. They put a dam across the state line. It was 200 foot long and 5 foot high. And 60 years later, they put a new dam where the one is today, and they raised it. And I've read that raised it anywhere from 9 to 12 feet. That formed the arms of the lake. That created Storm's Island, which had been a hill on Storm's Farm. And I guess even Chapel Island you could walk to before that. Chapel Island was known as Lime Ridge. They took the lime from that and used it in the iron furnaces that were here.
All right, what about fish?
Fish, here's your fish expert right here. Roger, go to it.
Greenwood Lake has always been a famous fishing spot. I think Grover Cleveland came here to fish at the Brandon House. And there are bass, pickerel, now there are trout, there are all kinds of fish in Greenwood Lake. And it still is evidently a great fish pond.
Greenwood Lake was in the state of Jersey at one time. New York to Jersey feuded over the state line.
That's the famous border war.
That's right. And that line went up that way somewheres.
I heard it was the Tuxedo Road.
The whole lake was in Jersey.
Tuxedo Road.
Beach. And next to it was a tavern for many years, the Coconut Grove.
It wasn't just a tavern, it was a nightclub.
Well,
how about a speakeasy? Was it that, Doris?
It was that too.
That burned down, a few years back. It burned down once before.
You know, I can almost see those old flivvers and, the bottles of gin and the whole thing. The flappers.
Well, I can remember the fire siren going off and the guy coming to the firehouse with their Model T 4s and jumping out before they were stopped. And they'd bang into each other and they'd grab the fire engine as it went by.
That belonged to a fellow by the name of Herb Lloyd. And it was a dance place and eating place. And he used to call it the St. Helena. And many of the local fellas like Harry Sudman used to have his band and they'd play there. And of course, no alcoholic beverages were served. It was during Prohibition.
He was a vaudevillian, this guy. And he had the vaudevillians there, too. He has a fireplace in there that has stones from all over the world that he collected as he went around.
Do you know whether that
He used to
fireplace
drive-
is still there?
Of course it is.
He used to drive a Chevrolet, little old Chevrolet car, and when he stopped, he'd take an anchor and throw it out. He had a rope tied to it, and he'd throw the anchor out. He was trying to be a funny guy. I think Doris has a picture of him where he looks like a complete nut.
Yeah, he looks like, what, Me Worry?
Yeah.
He was the first one. He started that.
Yeah, like in the Mad Magazine.
Yeah,
First.
yeah, what, Me Worry?
That's a shot of the Continental from the road.
What's the year on that, Mr.
I have no idea, really.
I'd say the 30s.
And there it always was not a country hotel, a hotel in the country. And I guess they always were sort of swanky, weren't they, Doris?
Well, now, if you wanted first-class accommodations and you'd call me and say you wanted the telephones and the rooms and the bath and everything, I always recommended the New Continental because at that time, the places around the lake, they only had the bathroom down the hall and the shower down the hall. There was no conveniences. But if you wanted to go first class, I always recommended the Continental.
The New Continental was a favorite for many of the rich and famous who came to stay on Greenwood Lake and was often frequented by superstars such as larger-than-life baseball legend Babe Ruth and Hollywood royalty like actress Greta Garbo. Some stars even performed at night and then relaxed by day lakeside. The iconic burlesque star Gypsy Rose Lee loved the outdoors. She could reel in the boys at night just as easily as reeling in fish from Greenwood Lake during the day. Actress Joanne Woodward portrayed Gypsy in the biographical movie of Gypsy Rose Lee's life. For some others, Greenwood Lake was the perfect place to run away and hide from the glitz, glamour, or oftentimes spurious headlines. The infamous Evelyn Nesbit was considered to be the first American supermodel. She was at the center of the crime of the century. Evelyn's husband, Harry Thaw, shot and murdered the world-famous architect Branford White, who happened to be in the theater at Madison Square Garden. Quite ironically, the same theater that Mr. White had designed. At the time, this scandal and subsequent trial was so sensationalized that Evelyn Nesbit could not go anywhere without being recognized. Think of it as the O.J. trial of that era. Some headlines were not just reserved for the infamous folks like Evelyn. Politicians such as three-term mayor of New York City, Jimmy Walker, were frequent visitors to the New Continental. Mayor Walker was referred to by some as the most corrupt mayor in New York City's history, but hey, he knew how to have some fun, and Greenwood Lake no doubt provided the mayor with his share of it. It was during his term in office that both the New York Giants and the Brooklyn Dodgers left New York. The New York Mets also started their franchise during his term. Can you imagine sitting at the bar at the Continental and overhearing a conversation between Babe Ruth and Mayor Walker talking about these historical events?
And I guess they always were sort of swanky, weren't they, Doris?
Well, now, if you wanted first-class accommodations and you called me and say you wanted the telephones and the rooms and the bath and everything, I always recommended the New Continental because at that time, the places around the lake, they only had the bathroom down the hall and a shower down the hall. There was no conveniences. But if you wanted to go first class, I always recommended the Continental.
What would be, this is a tough one for all three, what would be the difference in prices? What would a room be in we're talking the 1920s?
You get room and board for $15 a week at our place.
Right, and what would the swanky Continental charge?
Probably 25 or 30.
That'd be a big difference, though, really.
Yes.
We still sold it. That was the old Continental. That one next to it is known as the old Continental. I don't know much more than that about it.
Well, it was owned by a concert pianist before this owner, and they had a piano in every room.
Now, that certainly is Victorian. I don't know. And now, today, it is a private residence?
Private residence, yes.
The man had a piano in every room?
Yes. Now, it was an attic room, and I got a very weird feeling, like spirits. And my hair raised up my arms. I couldn't wait to leave the room.
That by the old Ferncliff. That's the Ferncliff Boathouse. We're going to show you some pictures of that now.
Now, the Ferncliff was
It was a hotel. It was originally put up as a man's club. And it ran that way for a few years, and then people by the name of Pitt bought it. And before 1924, one 4th of July, a year or two before that, it got struck. Not this building, but the one we're going to show you, the hotel itself got struck by lightning. And I guess the storm came up pretty fast. And if you were swimming, you had your bathing suit, and that's about all. Everybody lost everything in the fire. I had no fire truck in Greenwood Lake. We had to call Warwick. And by the time Warwick got here, the thing was right to the ground. It just went on fire all over. It was a tremendous building. It was up on those rocks that were coming upon.
Yes, it is. There was.
It was a big, big building.
It had 450 rooms.
What's the name of it again?
Ferncliff.
Ferncliff.
And when was the fire?
Before 1924. It was in the 20s, a couple of years before 1924, on the 4th of July. I have one of those brochures in my collection of that. It tells all about it and it shows all pictures of inside of it. It was a very swank place.
And all that's left is the boathouse.
The boathouse, and then now they built the last year or two. They built this house up on the cliff. This is where the other building. Look at the picture. You can see that's where it went, all up on there.
All right, Mr. Chrisman, what are we shooting at this moment?
Well, we'll come up on the woodlands. Another big hotel that was here for many, many years. Burned down in probably, 60? Yeah. 1960 it burned. Part of it, and then they saved part of it, and they finally ripped it down. That was run by James Council for many, many years. Was a hotel keeper at the lake, and he was in different spots. He ran a hotel over on Storms Island at one time. Then he ran this one. And if you search the records and whatnot, you find that the fellows that ran the hotels up the lake, one year they'd run one down here, and they seem to swap around a lot.
What am I shooting now? Looks like a lighthouse.
That's Groska Bauer's boathouse, and this whole area, there was 200 feet here that belonged to the Greenwood Lake Boat and Country Club. And it was a very swank club, I guess, and they had Commodores and everything else. They had
what?
They ranked themselves as Commodores.
Oh, okay. That's what I thought I heard.
They had Commodores. They had everything from canoe races up to motorboat races. And it got to be quite a hot thing, the way they would fight with each other, these people. This vacant piece of land over here, at one time there was a restaurant there called the Old Heidelberg, run by Emil Deckelmeyer. He was practically a landmark here, Greenwood Lake.
Great restaurateur.
And he stayed there until the property was bought by a Teddy Eggers, and then Deckelmeyer moved uptown. Deckelmeyer and Doris's father were good friends, or probably she can add something.
Well, they came from Union City. Deckelmeyer had a restaurant and a bar, just a restaurant at that time, in Union City. And the family knew him from there. And then he came up to Greenwood Lake, and it was through him, really, that my grandmother came to Greenwood Lake in 1917. And he always sang one song, and his veins on his neck would stick out in his head when he hit all the high notes.
Was it in German or English?
No, it was in English. Once again.
Doris, would you kind of tell us what we're focused on now as we're coming in?
Yes, this old house is very interesting. It had a
we're speaking of the big White House.
The big White House there.
It's got marble columns.
Yes.
Those columns are marble. You see.
And the doors and everything are etched glass, and there's a lot of stained glass in that building. And it had a beautiful, what was the roof? Clay?
No, it was slate.
Slate, a beautiful red slate roof on it. They took it down, but it was magnificent.
Now, what was the name of the?
It originally was, I believe it was built by a man by the name of Hoffman, and he was the head maitre d' down at Lush House Restaurant in New York City. And that man was interesting because he worked himself up from potboy right on up to manager of Bush House. And then it was sold to Steiner. And then from Steiner, it went to Frank McGuire. And he's the coach down at South Carolina University for basketball. And now other people have it. I don't know who the people are who have it now. But it's a beautiful old house inside. It's very German. And the chandelier in the dining room was made of deer's horns with the little lights on the end of it. Oh, it's a beautiful old house with a wine cellar. You want us to talk? This is Goodwill's Castle. When was that built? Do you know?
No, I don't know when it was built. I can tell you a story about it. Go ahead.
Well, I'll tell my story first. Maybe it's the same one. They had a fire in the castle, in the main castle. That would be this building here. They had the fire. And the firemen all came down and put the fire out. They found the wine cellar. And the fire lasted 3 days. Everybody was drunk.
Yeah, I remember that fire. I walked across the ice. I walked across the ice to see the place burn. In fact, I got color slides of it on fire.
Oh.
That wasn't this part.
Burned, but the outside is still there.
That wasn't this part, Ted. You'll see the other one get around the corner.
Get around the corner. This is just the front part.
But if you look at these buildings, this one and the one in the back, they're all built out of little pieces of slate. And this Dr. Goodwill, he would bring people. The castle itself, that you're going to see in a few minutes, was fashioned after his father's castle in Germany.
Again, can we have a kind of a date on this? Are we talking the 20s?
Well, as far back as I can remember, the castle was here, so it must have been built in the very, very early 1900s or late 1800s.
Before World War I, then?
Yeah, and I can remember Dr. Goodwill. I mean, he was alive when I was, I'd say, in my 20s, he was still around. But if you lived in Germany and wanted to come over here and he knew about you, he'd bring you over. But you had to work out your passage. And he kept some of these people, they were kept like slaves. They worked for years and years and years. In fact, some of them never got away from him. I believe some of them are buried on the property up there. And there's walls and there's buildings. And it's unbelievable the amount of work that they did.
That's magnificent.
This is just one. This is the little building. The main building's in the back. You have to go around the corner really to get a picture of that one.
Look at the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
And he lights it up every night.
Yeah.
And all the stone that they built this place comes from right here. In fact, the old timers called this Slate Stone Hill.
Yeah, and he made these people dig that out and carry it down, and he had gardens, and it was beautiful. It was really beautiful.
Yeah, the castle in the back here, and Marie O'Donnell owns the front part.
I sold that to him.
Yes, but the funny part is Mr. Tiedemann had 10 children, and of course he painted churches, and that was his business. He was a painter.
Look at this bridge. This is some more that was built by these slave people.
So he had to have a house big enough to house all these kids, so he bought the castle and he rebuilt it all.
The castle back in there.
Yes, your castle.
So the number of rooms we really don't know.
There were secret passageways and everything in it.
Now it's all apartments, but it's still owned by the Tiedemann family.
Just look at that pieces of stone.
Magnificent.
If you look toward the shore, you'll see the rocks are all slate. That's why they call it Slate Stone Hill.
What is the island out there?
We're waiting. That's Fox's Island.
Are we going around
You
it?
see.
Yeah.
And in between Fox's Island and the shore, there was a little tiny island.
Abercrombie.
Yeah, that we called the floating island. It was full of shrubs and bushes, but if you stepped on it, you'd slowly sink down. And there was a little shack on that island where an old timer lived for years. During Prohibition, they said that he sold alcoholic beverages there. But after he was gone, I guess it was the state of New Jersey, they towed the island away and chopped it up. There was a hindrance to navigation.
I thought that island floated away by itself, and then they had to chop it up.
They towed it out on ways and got rid of it.
Change around.
Now, you'll see an island, this Fox Island, that was known as Roosevelt Island. Yes. Teddy Roosevelt used to come out there and fish, and he'd had his, what do they call those places where you shoot duck from? Duck blind. Yeah, I think part of the duck blind is still standing there. But, and then the natives called it Roosevelt Island for quite a while.
But now, what's it called now, Doris?
Fox Island.
It reverted back to...
Yes, it reverted back to Fox, but it was called Roosevelt Island because of Teddy Roosevelt.
That's Lakeside Beach now. It's used for the development that's there. But years ago, behind where the brown building is, which is the clubhouse today, was a hotel known as Lakeside Hotel. That was another one of the post offices on Greenwood Lake. Raj, what do you know about it?
All I know is we used to row across the lake and leave the boat at Lakeside Hotel and climb the mountain to Lake Surprise and Big Huckleberries, and then we'd come down and get a cold beer at the Lakeside Hotel.
Now, you really had a near beer, not real beer.
No, there's real beer.
Now, you mentioned the lake. What was the lake you just mentioned?
Lake Surprise, this little lake on top of this mountain.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful little lake.
Belongs to the state of New Jersey now.
Yeah.
Green Acres.
They cleaned it up. It looks nice.
How do you get there?
There used to be a trail up from Lakeside Hotel. Now there are all homes there. I don't know.
There must be a road sign.
If the trail is still there or not.
Well, it's part of the Appalachian, too, isn't it?
Well, you could take the Appalachian Trail from up above and walk down.
But can you drive up there now?
No. It's really in the woods.
Yeah, we're right across. The storm's here.
Right here, I'm pointing out here in this cove, there used to be a mass of stumps. And every summer in the 1930s, there were a pair of loons that nested there. And they carried their little ones on their back. Now, today, that would be impossible in Greenwood Lake. Loons are in trouble even in the North Country. But they were here at one time.
The Browns Hotel was located at the south end of the lake in New Jersey, near Belcher's Creek. The Browns Hotel burned to the ground, just like the Lakeside Inn, the Ferncliff, Murchio's, Long Pine Inn, just to name a few. Every room had a book of matches. Probably not a great idea. The name Owasting dates back to somewhere between 1910 and 1915 and is believed to be an abbreviated form of an Indian word, Ayakawasting, meaning place of grassy hills. During that time, Greenwood Lake was known as Long Pond. In 1915, the Greenwood Company developed Owasting as a state-of-the-art vacation community. There was a gate with a gatekeeper that controlled entry into the community. The 2 stone pillars of that gate still remain on Owasting Road today. That colony contained a golf course and a clubhouse that was located at 3 Board Road. The Erie Railroad serviced commuters with a station that was only 2 minutes away. On September 8, 1925, Owasting received its Certificate of Incorporation and was wholly owned and operated by the Greenwood Company. In 1935, it was named the Owasting Country Club. However, the Greenwood Company was disbanded in 1954, and Owasting's assets were given to Columbia University. Soon after, an investor named Fred Wayron purchased the assets from Columbia University. In early 1955, Mr. Wayron offered the properties of Owasting to the association for $100,000 His proposal for major development was rejected by most of the association, but eventually a group of 61 members of Awasting formed a separate association and purchased the property for $75,000. After 10 years of ownership and management, the association sold the sewerage and water system to West Milford for $100,000 and the remaining properties to the Awasting Association for approximately $30,000. Through the years, social activities at the inn, the beach, and the boathouse define the Awasting lifestyle, with children's activities keeping the youth occupied and engaged. At some point in the 1960s, the inn fell into disrepair. However, by the early 2000s, the community had reached a decision to rebuild a new inn.
Okay, I have a map up at home, and it shows Storms Island and an island behind it.
That's right.
And I had a man working for me one day, and we looked at that, and he said, "Gollies, I never knew there was an island here," and he lived here in Sterling Forest.
Now you lost me. Where is this island right there?
Well, it's right over this, the same thing Roger's talking about, apparently. It's these stumps that come up.
Oh, a floating island.
This fellow went home and he told his grandmother that I had this picture. And she said, "Golly," she said,
through here, you have to be.
I can remember my mother telling me about an island that was there, and there was a terrible storm one night, and the island sank and the people in the house drowned. So apparently that's the island that comes up today. I have a map that shows that island.
I can't get in over there because there's too many stumps.
No, we don't want to.
Just go around.
I have to go around.
Very shallow here. You must have been here, you know.
I've been through it. It's very shallow. That's why I said I can't go over there because there's those stumps you were talking about.
Well, that's the stumps, and that's where that island is.
Now just try to vision along this whole strip of land here, east, north and south, there was a railroad track leading into Sterling Forest.
All right, and when was that, Doris, taken out? Very recently, or?
Well, around 1930. 31, roughly. When the railroad left, they even took the rails up. And everyone that went down, the welders would cut them a piece of rail for a souvenir.
We are now on the east shore, am I correct?
That's right.
Between Storms Island and the East Shore.
I know. What is the name of the island?
Storms. Go ahead.
Oh, that's the one that was. That floats?
No.
That's the real island.
Yeah.
This is a picture of the hotel that was on there.
Where was the hotel, Roger?
The hotel was right past the...
Roger,
just
just a
gotta look
second.
towards it anyway.
Just a second.
Let him get this picture first. It was about where the wires run across, Roger.
Yeah, it was about midway.
Okay, Roger. Now this is Storms
Island.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
The hotel was right about in the middle of the island. And the last owner of it was a fellow named Roxy, who was a very genial gentleman, and he was a great fisherman. Now, to get to the hotel, on the opposite shore, they had a dock and a big bell with a hammer. And if you wanted to come over to the hotel to get a drink or something to eat, you'd hit the bell with a hammer, and they'd come over and get you in a boat.
Roger, do you ever remember a bridge being across?
Here?
Yeah.
No,
because I have pictures of it.
Yeah.
Of the bridge.
Now, I see.
Now, this church, you see the picture of.
Would you show us that again, Doris? Because I didn't really get a long enough shot. Go ahead.
This church was on the hill up in the back. And I don't know when it was built. It was there ever since I can remember. But they took it down some years ago, and it's all gone. Wonder when that was built, that church. That's been there. When my grandfather built houses here, that church was there.
What denomination was it? Do you know?
It was a Catholic
church.
Yeah.
Right. And somebody took it down?
They took it down.
It was sold. I saw the church, and I was interested in restoring it. And matter of fact, it was almost all set, but we had to get permission from the Passaic Diocese, and they didn't want to be bothered. But it must have been beautiful because, see, there was no Catholic church in Greenwood Lake at that time, and this was it. So everybody came by boat on Sunday morning and came here to church. Well, they took the big side wheelers like the Montclair and those boats.
Now, would you mention a few of those other...
We are.
Oh, we are, okay.
You're talking about...
I get ahead of the story sometimes.
This is another shot from here.
That shot was taken from right the front of the church. And you can see the old Sterling Forest Railroad station, which was right in here.
We're almost at the state line, aren't we, Rush?
Yeah, we're coming to the state line.
That's the dam you wanted to know about. Okay? Tell me when you're ready. Okay, this was where the first dam was built in 1766. It was the dam that was put in. It was 200 foot long and 5 foot high. It was crossed here at this state line. And that raised this part of the lake, but it didn't do anything for that. Because then later on, the other dam is way down right through there. And that's where they raised up the rest, and it made all this into the lake and the arms.
Now, we come to where the old Sterling Forest Hotel was. In the shore where you see this gray home, that's where the Sterling Forest Hotel was. It was a very busy place. There were hundreds of people. The boats would come in here. It was really a busy, busy place.
Didn't the conductors stay there too from the railroad and the firemen from the railroad and that?
No, the firemen from the railroad stayed down here a few hundred yards where the turntable was. There was a big turntable down along this shore with a little shack where the firemen and engineers stayed. The conductors stayed up on the hill right across from my house.
And what I'm shooting right now is where...
This is where the Sterling Forest Hotel was.
And it was on which side of the line? Was this on the New York side?
On the New York side.
Right. And the railroad went right by it.
Railroad went by and on up along the shore to the big ice house. And there it ended.
Now, another thing you want to get. This is about the site of the rocket flight that we're on right here.
Yeah, this is the site.
This is about the site.
Undismayed by past failures, the designers of New York's rocket plane are getting ready to try again. They say there are 6,000 letters aboard, though where they're going or how soon they're expected to get there isn't quite clear. Here. Still, they say determination wins in the end. But even a rocket plane must make whoopee sometime.
The ramp was set up over here, and the plane was set up on that because the first one didn't go, and then 2 weeks later or something it did, and it went flying up like that, fell down on the ice.
Just crossed the state line.
Then the motor started, and it went, and it just went right over the line.
All right, so we're almost at the very
You're
spot.
right about the spot, just about this far out.
Right on in front of the hotel.
Where we see this young lady rowing, maybe. And did it go over the Jersey line?
Yeah, well, it did. It came off the ramp and fell.
Well,
And then the fact is, it had come towards the people, everybody ran. And then it sat there with the motor sputtering, and it actually went in the air, went up and crashed, but it went maybe 15 yards.
What was the purpose of the rocket?
Yeah, New York to New Jersey.
You had a question.
What was the purpose of the rocket?
It was the first airmail rocket flight in the United States. First airmail liquid-propelled rocket flight in the United States. They issued stamps. It was all dreamed up by a fellow by the name of Fred Kessler. And John Sly, who was the mayor at the time, was a stamp collector, and he got them to have it here. And it was a big thing. It was on radio. Bob Trout talked about it on the radio and all kinds of stuff. It was, the rocket Gloria was named by Gloria Sly. She was a 5-year-old girl at the time. She was the daughter of the man that worked with Kessler on this thing. And they had a bottle of champagne. Gloria Quackenberg, Gloria Sly was the daughter of John, and she was the one that was to christen the rocket. And they had a bottle of champagne, and when they opened it, it was so cold that the champagne had frozen solid. So then they took a paper cup with snow in it, and they had a hard time getting that out of there, and some Boy Scout helped her, and that's what they christened the rocket with. So Gloria went on high school and college and became a teacher here in Greenwood Lake for many years, and we were lucky enough a couple of years ago, Doris and she and I sat down and talked about old times at Greenwood Lake.
Now, Raj, the bottom part is Mountain Lakes.
Mountain Lakes Inn. The Sterling Forest Hotel partially burned. I don't know what year that was, Gil. And then someone else bought it and called it Mountain Lake Inn. And they did take guests for a while.
The top one is the Arlington, and the bottom one is the Milford.
Doris, can you tell us when they were running?
Roger?
Well, they ran right up almost until the railroad pulled out. And they would meet the people at the station and take them to all the hotels on the shores of Greenwood Lake.
Right. Doris, what's the top one on this side?
Top one is the Montclair.
Double-decker.
Double-decker.
Now, the Montclair was brought up to Sterling Forest on 2 flat cars. It was launched here and taken up to Brandon Shores. They took the hull up to Brandon Beach, and there the local men built the second deck on it. Then that was decommissioned before the others. The other 2 ran after that. It was taken over to Willow Point and beached there, and they took the deck off of that, and they took it up on Elm Street in Greenwood Lake, and a fellow by the name of Harry Sackett made a cottage out of it. And a few years ago, it was ripped down.
And this is the Anita.
That was owned by Jacob Ryerson. The other 3 were owned by the Erie Railroad.
Now let's kind of get dates on these again. What are your?
They apparently. Well, I have an ad in my possession. I think I got it from Roger, and it said July the 1st or July of 1875, the Montclair stopped running, and the other 2 were a couple years after that, and then they ran up to the 20.
When was the Montclair beached?
Montclair,
say that again, Mr.
The Montclair was beached up by Willow Point Marine, and they took the top deck off, and it was taken up on Elm Street by a fellow by the name of Harry Sackett, and he made a cottage out of it.
And what was the date again, roughly?
I don't know just when that was taken there, but that cottage was on Elm Street until just a couple years ago, and they ripped it down and threw it away, which is a shame.
Doris, what is this picture of all these folks in the boat and so on?
Well, this is at Willow Point Marina, and they're boarding the Wilhelmina.
It was owned by W.C. DeGraw.
That's down by Breezy Point.
Those folks certainly are in the Victorian age.
Oh, yes, that's the 1800s there.
That's the 1800s.
A lot of these places had their own
George, would you hold that up for just another moment or so? Now, that would be a steamboat, right?
That's a steam launch.
A steam launch.
DeGraw had one. Tenike had one. Various guys. They send these down to pick their own people up from the train.
Fire.
This is what remained of Castle Tavern after the first big fire. But the owner, who was George Smits, rebuilt it, which would be the building that's here now, except they've changed it a great deal.
He was quite an artist.
Oh, yeah.
He had the paintings.
Inferno.
Dante's Inferno.
I'm still trying to find out what happened to those paintings.
They were paintings on velvet. They were the original paintings on velvet. There were some of it. The woman with the snakes in her hair. Medusa. He had a Medusa picture. Came through these paintings on velvet, and they were, I'd say, how many? A dozen?
More than that.
Yeah. And if he came to the end, he had the painting of a tramp with a chicken on a spigot over an open fire. and a blonde on his knee, and a bottle of booze. Yes.
Naked women alongside.
Yes. It was
the hobo's dream.
That was called it the hobo's dream. Again, what are we dating this in? The 1920s or the 1930s?
This is in the 30s and early 40s.
Yes. And then you went upstairs, and he played the drums to music, and he'd play a song, and then at the end of the song, he'd clap, you know, after that, and he'd hang a little sign down, would come down, and would say baloney on it.
The original building, the first one here, was built as a clubhouse for the property owners. But that was long gone before George Schmidt saved
Morin Launch Works was located on the property where Cove Castle is located today and presently owned by our host, Bob Herrera. Recently, Bob Herrera was fortunate enough to speak with local Mike Morin Jr. about his family's story and their relationship to Greenwood Lake. Mike Morin Jr. has fond memories of his life on the lake, especially his dad's business and the requisite experiences. His father, Michael Morin Sr., was one of 6 brothers, all of whom arrived in America from Austria in 1912. The brothers came here in order to flee Austria just before World War I. In Austria, the Morin brothers were not just boat builders. They were master craftsmen that built 3-masted schooners that sailed the 7 seas. After visiting Greenwood Lake, they were quick to notice that the majestic views of our mountains and lakes reminded them so much of their motherland, Austria. And so, Michael Morin Sr. and his brothers decided to set up shop right here. They built their boats under the brand Morin Craft. These boats were speedboats similar to the familiar and ubiquitous Chris Craft boats. From 1916 to 1958, the Morins built between 50 to 60 of the highest quality Morin Craft speedboats. Michael Morin Sr. was a self-taught and naturally talented designer and builder. He did not have the opportunity to attend school until 3rd grade. He had neither a formal education in engineering nor schooling in boat building. However, his adroit dedication and attention to details were the keys to his understanding of engineering. As a result, his drawings were comparable to even the highest level of his boat-building competitors. Every boat he designed and built was custom-made to order. One of the more notable Morin Craft builds was a gorgeous 21-foot mahogany speedboat, custom-made for the most famous New York Yankee baseball legend Babe Ruth. If you were fortunate enough to own a Morin Craft today, it would be valued between $40,000 to $100,000. We know from the records that in the 1940s, Babe Ruth purchased that top-of-the-line boat from Morin Sr. for $5,000. So this begs the question, what would Babe Ruth's personal boat be worth today? To give you a little perspective, these days, a mere baseball bat or a ball autographed by the Babe can sell well into the millions of dollars. Trying to imagine what that personal boat would be worth today? Well, that's a futile task for a memorabilia collector or even an auction house. And as for the location of Babe Ruth's boat, well, that's still an unsolved mystery, but wow, that would be some barn find, wouldn't it? During the late 1930s and 40s, Greenwood Lake was known for hosting very popular boat racing events, which brought big sponsors such as Ford and Mercury. Morin Craft was considered one of the elite builders and would compete against Chris Craft and Garwood boats, just to name a few. Mike Morin Jr., who still resides in Greenwood Lake, was born in the early 40s and still has vivid memories of his experiences interacting with the great Babe Ruth. As a young boy, Mike was actually present when Babe Ruth was picking up his newly built Morin Craft. Babe not only loved his boat, but was a fan of fancy cars and would like to show them off and take the local kids for rides around the lake. Mike Morin Jr. still recalls Ruth driving his brand new Lincoln Continental, built by Ford. Ruth was so excited to show him this new car that was equipped with electric windows, which at that time was a very big deal. Just like a child, the babe played with the windows by making them go up and down and over again, up and down, all the while giggling for Mike's enjoyment. Naturally, Mike Jr. was extremely impressed by and very proud of his father's numerous innovations, his building prowess, his engineering skills, but these talents extended far beyond boat building. At his shop, Morin Launch Works, which existed right here on the very property of Cove Castle, right where you sit today, Mike Morin Sr. used his ingenious engineering skills and fabricating knowledge to build the launch structure for the first U.S. rocket airplane mail flight attempt on February 23rd of 1936. The air mail rocket was named Gloria. After the historic launch of the rocket, Morin Sr. had the foresight to preserve the wreckage of the rocket and brought it back to his shop where it stayed for over 50 years until the 1980s. Michael Morin Jr. presently owns the Gloria and has loaned the rocket to be displayed at Teterboro Airport Museum. The rocket Gloria has since been refurbished and currently still hangs in the museum in Teterboro, New Jersey. Mike Morin Jr. remained on the property for many years after his father's passing. During those years, he remembers the last day of the historic steamship Milford. The steamship was decommissioned and docked at Morin Marina for years. Morin Marina is now the Cove Castle. Among his many other accomplishments, Mike Morin Jr. was a state wrestling champion and a competitive arm wrestler. The good ship Milford had been docked for so many years at his marina that Mike decided to turn it into his personal gym for a while. Over time, the Milford started to deteriorate and could not be restored, and eventually was taken away in parts. Mike Morin Jr. did not go into the family business of boat building, but much like his father became a successful business owner in the Greenwood Lake area, Mike Jr. went into the hospitality and entertainment industry. As Mike likes to remind himself and others, it was a lot easier. That may or may not be true, but if you happen to ask Cove Castle's owner, Bob Pereira, well, let's just say he might have quite a different opinion. Speaking of Greenwood Lake establishments, it should be noted that Mike Jr. also owned and operated two very popular bars in the Greenwood Lake Village, the Yellow Submarine in the early 70s and the infamous Night Owl from 1973 to 1989. Mike Jr. himself was an entertainer. He was, in fact, an Elvis impersonator and performed alongside the Hobos. Mike's bars operated during the heydays of another Greenwood Lake era. True locals recall that the drinking age for New York was 18, while it was 21 in New Jersey. During a time when there were over 70 bars, clubs, and restaurants on the New York side of Greenwood Lake, and the drinking age was 18, Greenwood Lake had many titles, including being known as Beer Can Alley or Arson Capital of New York. Cousin Brucey coined the phrase Groovy Greenwood Lake on WABC Radio. Well, there are so many more stories about the wild rock and roll party years of Greenwood Lake, and we look forward to bringing them to you in the future Greenwood Lake historical related events. Meanwhile, the Morin Launch property was eventually sold in 1980 to owner Frank Dieber, another great business operator and visionary who contributed his own passion and excitement to this vibrant community. Frank turned the property into what was known as Castle Tavern. This property is now Cove Castle, lovingly owned and operated by Bob Pereira, whose authentic and genuine passion for both music and the preservation of history inspires him to bring back the majesty and meaning to the better qualities of historic Greenwood Lake and lake life in general.
Now this photo is a photo of when they were building the ice house. You can see all the scaffolding. The ice house was built of hollow tiles, so they were quite large.
And could you give us a date, Roger? Again, a rough.
I don't know. The railroad was here in 1880.
1875.
1875. So the ice house was built around that time.
What was the ice supply? This is where they supplying the ice to. That's not good.
Yeah, here is the original brick building that's still there. That was the engine room for all the machinery that hoisted the ice up. And that's the brick building that's still here. Of course, it don't look the same.
That's the one we just took a shot
That's
of,
right.
To begin with.
Yeah.
And your question was,
What was the? Where was the ice going?
where was the ice going?
Went all through. It went down to Jersey, Hoboken, and there they distributed all around. This picture shows a man working on the ice.
And they used horses and everything.
Yeah, horses were used, and I remember several times a horse would slip and fall in the water, and they weren't able to get them out. Well, it was almost impossible because you only have, about 15 minutes, and then the horse was gone. Oh, here they are pushing a huge box of ice in to be chopped up and hoisted up into the ice house.
So it was a major business, really.
Oh, and there was another ice house down in Jersey, just as big as this one.
Now, Wilbur also mentioned something about they had special horseshoes or special...
They used cleats, they call them, what they call corks on the horses' shoes. They screwed them in, and that let them get a grip. And the men that worked on in these ice houses, of course, the people from the north end of the lake up in the village would come down here. They'd have to walk all the way down, probably. A lot of them didn't have transportation. And they'd work, I understand, from sun up to sundown for $1 a day. And also, there wasn't enough people here, and the ice companies would go down to the Bowery and pick up the bums of the tramps from down there and bring them up. And they weren't dressed for this, am I right, Raj? And they would wrap rags around their feet to keep warm, and they called them the rag feet. And I understand one year when they were taking ice out of the ice houses, they came upon one of the rag feet amongst the cakes of ice. They apparently fell down there and got preserved, but of course nobody knew it. They figured he just got on a railroad and went back to New York.
And then they worked all night because when the ice was ready, they had to get it in as fast as they could. They had regular ships and they fed the men. They had a barracks here where they slept.
I understand they gave them liquor every day, too.
Yeah, well,
I'm going. Keep going.
Unless you want to tell us what this house is on the East Shore.
This house here was built for the organist of St. John the Divine Church in New York City by Whitney. And it's a strange little house. It's very beautiful inside. It's done in wainscoting, and the beds are held.
Now, what's wainscoting for our young viewers?
Well, it's a piece of wood that has grooves in it. It's pretty wood.
It's an ornate trim.
Very ornate trim, yes. And the beds are hung from the ceiling with chains because of snakes. At that time, it must have been loaded with rattlers and copperheads up here, which we still have a lot.
They're still there.
Yeah. And but you go through the house, and now today the chains are still holding these beds up. They took me through a couple of.
Does the snake come down a chain? No.
No, the chains are held from the ceiling.
Yeah, I think so.
See, and underneath it's all open. They can't get up.
From here, all the way up this way, you see that sailboat. That's all owned by Sterling Forest.
And at this moment in 1989, there's a real debate on what's going to happen with this land.
Yeah, all the mountain is. That whole mountain is all Sterling.
So we may be seeing the last kind of virgin land here.
That's right.
Like when we were all children. This is the way this whole side of the lake looked. From like if you look here, all the way up, right to the Brandon house.
There are no houses from here
to the Brandon house.
The houses only started here after the war, World War II.
Oh, well,
up at the other end, but not here.
No.
There was no forest nose. Busey had a tent there. That was all.
Yeah, they had camps, if anything. They used to rent land you could put a camp on.
multiple-story forest land, a pretty wild, beautiful tract of land.
And it's, so I read something like, is it 17,000 acres or some fantastic amount of land? The largest
20,000.
Oh,
Yeah, 20.
undeveloped piece as such. It's not a park in Orange County. So it's our heritage. And let's take a picture.
I bought that fire. And the Brandon house sat there for quite a few years later. And it just wasn't used anymore. Got in real disrepair, and then I don't know what year it was. What year do you know, Doris? What would it burn down? 1860s?
About 25 years ago.
Yeah.
To be exact, 25 years ago. Yes.
All this property was all part of it. Around the corner, they had their own dock, and they had a little building there that's where the band people used to stay, in that little building. We're coming up on the Chapel Island, which was known as Lime Ridge originally. And in 1861, the Waterstones moved here, and then they brought the Brandons, who was a brother-in-law, up a year or so later. He bought all this land, including Lime Ridge, which is now Chapel Island. There was no church here. Mrs. Waterstone was quite upset about that. And she used to hold hymnal sings in the Waterstone cottage on Sunday evenings. And she finally got the idea of a church here, and it was called the Church of the Strangers originally. It started over on the main shore, and after a year or so, they moved out on Chapel Island, and they put up the tent platform there. And
again, what date are we thinking of?
1861, 62, 63, along in there. And then they framed the tent platform and made a wooden building of it. And then, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years later, they added the steeple, which you saw, I could see, I guess, in some of these pictures Doris had. The stonework was put up later. And in 1951, kids were playing in the building with fireworks, and they set it afire and it burned down. Now, the building is owned by Victor Ledborough. He's a county family judge. He built this home that you see there now. That's where the minister used to stand when he came and the folks would all come out here and float around, and the minister and the choir would be right up here on this precipice, and they speak out here, and this was before electronics, and he just talked as loud as he could, and you'd hear him out here. My wife and I were married in his church on this island, June 1st, 1940. So that's sort of a dear spot in my heart for this location.
Next June will be 50 years.
That's right, it'll be 50 years next. But unfortunately, she won't be around to supper with to celebrate it with me. All these boats would be around. Of course, the wind would blow and you'd have waves, and they'd get in a canoe. There were two people in a canoe. One had a basket on the end of a bamboo stick, and they'd come out there trying to collect the money from me. You're trying to put the money in the basket, and it's going like this, and they'd go around. And I tell you, everybody came here. I have seen Christians, I have seen Catholics and Protestants and Jews all here come out for these services. It didn't matter. It was just the uniqueness of it, to come here.
But they have the blessing of the
fleet here every year now. Yeah.
They hold it off.
They do now?
Yes,
Yeah, they do.
Yes,
Every
every
year.
year. Mr. Ludwig very
Yep.
generously gives this.
Yeah.
When is that done?
In June.
That is still the original building, the lower part, not all the way across. And there was a bar in there, and the first thing they did, they ripped the bar out. They were good Episcopalians, and they didn't like the bar there, so they ripped the bar out. And of course, then I mentioned that they were the ones that bought the Brandons here, and then they grew and got to be a big building, and all kinds of things happened to it over the years.
This is what we're taking a picture of now?
Yeah, this is it. That's the boathouse next to it. It got to be known later on. First it was the Waterstone Cottage, and then it was Ikawa. And then by the name Mr. Moses bought it. And, he ripped the building down, but left the original cottage there and restored it. It was sold a few years ago, and they added on to it again.
And Doris, you're holding up the same thing again. Is that correct?
A little different. There's
Different view of it. But this is the same place.
Waterstone Cottage.
I can't see that.
Yeah, I'm seeing I'm wrong. Don't scare me like
Waterstone Cottage. They call it Inglewood. It wasn't Inglewood quite then.
Yes, but you know the
But this is
Waterstone.
what was here.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Waterstone family were a very active family in the community. She was a school teacher, was she not?
Yeah.
Up on Old Dutch Hollow Road. And
she gave the first books and created the Greenwood Lake Library.
Yes.
700 books she donated, and they started the library in Greenwood Lake.
Now, one thing more.
As the Commodore of this vessel, any comment you'd like to make?
It was a learning experience for me. I learned a lot.
And you certainly have done an excellent job. Now we're not done.
But what I like about it also is when I come out here this time of year, you look, these trees are beautiful. They're absolutely gorgeous, and I enjoy the scenery. I'll come out here during the summertime and just float out there and stay out there for hours. Doris knows that.
So we just saw someone, and we weren't able to get a shot all by themselves, reading a book in a boat, just enjoying the beautiful lake.
Relaxing.
Later on.
There's an awful lot of land down there in Sterling Forest. He developed I guess most of it, didn't he, Roger?
Yeah, he was a big landowner.
Yeah. This was his home, and it's beautiful with flowers and everything else. And Ted, this is one that you have up in your office right now. It's one of my paintings. We kept a private home right down here. Stone entranceways there. Had his own boathouse here. It was really a beautiful, beautiful place. Today, it still has the tower there. Incidentally, it was on fire many years ago, and the firemen put it out, and somebody put it on, and they came back and they put it out 3 times in one day. They reset it, trying to get rid of it, but the firemen put it out, so that's why it's still there today. It's a miracle that there's anything left of it.
Let's come off of this pontoon boat
Get underneath the bridge.
And now we're
going down the east arm and the end.
Could you tell us about this place that we're now going to photograph?
Well, I can remember when a fellow by the name of Henry Erb had it when we first came here to Greenwood Lake. And then later on, a fellow by the name of Youngwing had it. And then where are we located? Well, we just came onto the Waterstone Bridge.
Oh, I'm sorry. Now, where's that building, y'all?
The building is right behind us. The bridge ends.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, we're trying to get ourselves organized. And that was
after Youngwing, then it was sold to Bob Connor, who had the crow that we talked about.
And this is where the crow was.
That's right. That's where I guess he was there more or less when he was going to buy it in 1917, but he just didn't live that long. We had a home up the road from there.
It's called the Alcove.
Today it's called the Alcove. It belonged to a fellow by the name of Ed Forbes for years and years and years, and he ran it as the Golden Pheasant. Am I right, Paris? And well, then it was owned by what? Tiska? Several different owners, and they've all run it as a restaurant. Today it's known as the Alcove.
Next door to there is Sedgwick's.
This one. I don't think you'll ever get that or not.
It's going to be very difficult, but we will try. And Doris, what is the name of this place that we're...
This was
Sedgwick's.
And what you want to keep your pen right on that.
Okay, I'm trying to.
Sedgwick's.
And this too was a restaurant hotel?
It was a hotel.
They were all old boarding houses. They weren't restaurant hotels. They're restaurants today.
That was a private home when I was a kid, and they had a pathway leading to the lake. And from the time flowers would first come out in the spring till right to frost, there was always constantly new flowers coming up. And also, if you look at the building in the rear, I don't know if you get a shot of that or not, Ted.
I know. What am I looking at?
You see the one with the red roof? Right. The one next to it?
Yes.
Well, that was
the one next to it is one we really want.
Well, Mrs. Sutton had that built, and it was up on top of the hill. And I worked there one summer as a dishwasher. And her customers were getting older, and they complained about running up and down the hill. And the next year, she had to move down, and they moved that thing down with horses and whatnot. They didn't have any modern equipment, and she was worried about what she had to move, and they told her, don't move a dish or anything, and they brought that thing down the hill like that, from the top of the hill right down to where it is today.
All right.
That was in 1930s that happened.
And as Doris reminded me, is that they were really boarding houses.
That was a boarding house.
You see, people didn't make one-day trips. People came up here and stayed at least a week.
Yep.
Or a month, or for the whole summer. I mean, you couldn't come up here and just spend the day. It was too far from the city. You had too many flats on the way up.
That was people by the name of Cordell who owned that house when it was a private home. They were related in some way to the Brandons and the Waterstones whom we talked about before. It was all private homes. It wasn't any eating places or anything like that.
So Doris, where are we headed now?
Right over to we're headed to was a hotel over there, Ted.
All right, we'll take a shot as we're moving.
They're called Grand View Hotel, and was originally operated by George Tenike, who was a brother of Cole Tenike.
And again, a date roughly on this.
Well, this must go back to the 1800s. It has to go back to the 1800s when it was built, probably in the 1890s or somewhere along in there. And then later on, it was run by the Ratners. They rented it out and called it the Vindabona.
Yeah, that was right here.
That was right where.
All right, help me out again.
Right up in there.
Which dock now?
That one, the white one with the red rubber on it. It was right there. When I was a youngster, I only lived around the corner. They had their own barn, their own horses there. They had a pony, which I was allowed to come down and take out for them because nobody seemed to rent it out, and I used to have the fun of playing with him. One night, many years, I don't know how old I was, they had movies at the parish house, which was the Episcopal church up here, and I went there and I walked back down, and Margaret Connor was walking there, and we parted at over here, what we call the boat landing. I came home, went up to bed, had a cup of cocoa, went to bed, and the next thing my mother's waking me up, get up, the Grand View was on fire. Well, we came down. No, we didn't come down because we went out, and all through the hole over our house we saw a piece of tuba float right over our house. And she and I took rake and we worked on the roofs around us, and there were 5 other buildings caught fire. The firemen came and they threw the suction hose in the lake here, and they sucked the whole hose full of ice. So they had to take the fire truck, go back to the firehouse, and chop the ice out of the hose. By the time they came back, it was gone. And my mother and I remember we walked down at that time, and the tower, we saw that fall down, this tower that was on it. And she looked in there, and all she could see was this terrible fire, and she said, that was what hell must look like. It was some experience. But it went down in 15, 20 minutes, I think. Somebody set it on fire. Next, we're going to go up where all those boats are sticking out up there. Because from here on up, there's Tenike's farm. And he raised cattle. He had horses. He had the hotel here, which we're not going to see because it's back off on the other side of the road, but you can take a picture of it. And he was the local constable. He was a great big man, and he had quite a reputation.
Had his boat, and it used to go through the swinging bridge down there and down to Sterling Forest.
What's swinging?
Yeah, we're going to be discussing the swinging bridge a little later.
We're going to talk about the swinging bridge.
And somebody got mad at him, and the boat was at the end of this dock, not where it is now. They've extended it. But his boat was at the end of the dock, and when I was a youngster, we could see it laying there.
This is under the water,
Somebody drilled a hole in it and sunk it up here. That was the Carrie T. It was named for his daughter.
So how many passengers might that have carried?
Probably 30 or 40. It was a little boat.
And that's right where I'm focusing now, at the end of the lake here.
Yeah. leased the Linden House for 3 years. She came up here through Emil Deckelmeyer from Union City, as we mentioned before.
And this is when your family first moved up here?
1917. And it was before the Crispins moved in, I hope you'll notice. You said 19.
But anyway, Doris,
all right.
Your mother first really didn't want to live here. Is that correct?
Yes,
That's
my
straight?
mother didn't care for it, but this is many years later.
And then she kind of grew on her.
Grew on her, it certainly did. So anyway, 1917, they leased the Linden House for 3 years. The first year, a kid got polio, and she was quarantined for July and August, which is the prime season. The following year, my cousin almost drowned in the lake. So the third year, when the lease ran up, she wouldn't take it anymore. She said it was a hard luck house. And then she went from there to Ten Oaks over here. And she was there from 1920. She stayed there for about 5 years. And then moved to the Maplewood in 1925.
The Linden House lasted, it too burned. But wasn't that very, very recently? About 20 years or less?
Yeah, about 15, 20 years ago, yeah.
You know, the Linden House, when Doris mentions that, I have an ad from back in the 1870s, and the ad says no malaria for the Linden House. And the year before, they had malaria and had to shut down. And the ad the next year said no malaria.
From where was
she? Doris tells about this. That must have been a hard luck.
Oh, really?
It was a swing bridge way back. It was up here in the middle. You could turn around. We were up there by Ten Oaks, and Coach Ten Oaks had that boat to carry tea, and he'd come through and go down to pick up his people at the station. They'd bring a horse down and turn it around. And then hopefully they'd close it again before they left. And when he came back up the lake, he would beep his horn, his whistle, and tell them how many he had on board, and they set up for that many. They send the horse down again and open the thing. And I understand, pardon me, many times they didn't close it up. So if you came along, you had to be awful careful, or you're allowed to end up in the lake. I got one thing other. We opened, and the carry tea ready to come through. And over on the side where this hand is, you'll see the Maplewood Inn, which probably at that time was known as Row Cottage.
And what would be the date of this?
This is before 1920. No, this isn't. That's back in the 1800s.
Yeah, early.
That's early 1800s, or late 1800s, or early 1900s.
Yeah.
All right, let me get another one. This one next, I think, because
this is newer.
Yeah, let me take this one.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter really. How was that too?
What do we have here now, Wilbur?
Well, this is a picture of the Maplewood Inn, and it's before 1924. And how I know it's before 1924 is because the ice house that's there had the second story on, and that burned down in 1923, and that caused the men to get together and form a fire company in 1923. 14 men got together the night after the fire, and they formed the fire company. So this is definitely before. This had to be in 1923 or before.
In the first photograph, did we identify the boat in it? I'm not sure.
Yes, that was a carry tea.
Fine, I wanted to make sure. Now we have a third picture.
Right, now we have this one. And again, this shows the swing bridge. It's hard to tell the year of this one, okay? Now this shows the Maplewood Inn and the swing bridge. Now after the carry T was sunk, somebody drilled a hole in her and sunk her up there. There wasn't really any reason to open the bridge anymore, and they ended up by putting planks down all over it. I guess the original part had gone bad and it didn't swing anymore. But we still call it the swing bridge, and you can still see the pier in the middle of it.
Okay. Now, Greg family came here in 1925. We've been here 64 years. Before we had it, people by the name of Hubbard had it. They had it for 25 years before that, and it was always run as an old-fashioned rooming house. Room and board. You had 3 meals a day. Before Hubbard's, another family had it for 25 years. I don't know their name, but the building itself is at least 140 years old. The barn in the back of the building has all wooden pegs. That's about all I can say.
Well, of course, way back, this land was up a lot more, and they dug it out for a lot of it. There's one picture shows another building back over past where the ice house is, we're going to see in a few minutes. Neither Doris or I know what that is, but I have a feeling it might have it probably was something for their horses or wagons or something like that. It was the row cottage way back, and I understand also Quackham, people by the name of Quackhambush ran it at one time. Of course, Doris and I don't know the dates of this at all.
And the original deed was Caldwell.
Yeah, Caldwell owned most of the north end of Greenwood Lake. He owned this, he owned upward Tenike.
Caldwell's from the eastern end of the county, too.
I don't know. Solomon Caldwell, this was. And he owned all this land. He owned all around.
So how many borders in the early days?
Well, in the early days, you could accommodate 100 people.
Greenwood Farms, also known as The Colony, was founded in 1919 and was the first African-American resort in New York State, well known amongst many affluent African Americans of that era. Some of the most notable African Americans from the New York business or arts community either lived or vacationed at the Colony. This included the great American poet and national treasure Langston Hughes. Greenwood Forest Farms consisted of 28 cottages. Land was set aside for a clubhouse and a man-made lake. The streets were privately owned and were maintained by the community, and for several decades, the community even generated its own electricity. Segregation in the southern states is well documented in this nation's history, but African Americans often face similar circumstances on beaches and lakes in other parts of the country, including the places where you all currently live. Beginning in the late 19th century, segregation kept whites and African Americans separate in virtually all aspects of life, whereby they were either prohibited outright or at the very least made to feel unwelcome. This included vacation destinations as well. As a result, some of the more affluent African Americans bought large homes or cottages and were relegated to form their own resort communities. Greenwood Farms in New York, sometimes known as The Colony, consisting of 143 acres, was one such community. To this day, in and around Warwick, historical markers are present to remind us of this portion of our history's disparity and also to recognize the significance of Greenwood Farms.
Your